Okay, so we left, is this where we left off? Okay, so what's biodiversity and why is it so important? Just think if there was one type of plant in your garden.
You wouldn't get all the nutrients that you need.
Well, but think about one plant in your garden. Why is that? It's not a big deal for the first few years, but after that, what happens?
It's going to suck up all the...
Yeah, because that particular plant species uses certain things in your soil and doesn't use other things in your soil. So after a while, that particular species is going to take up all of those things from your soil. And what's going to happen to those things in your soil? They're going to be depleted, and then what's going to happen to that one species of plant? Exactly. So the same thing would happen on the Earth, in this biosphere, if we didn't have biodiversity, because certain organisms will contribute things to the environment that other organisms need. Like us, one of our waste products is what? Yeah, well, we don't need it, it's a waste product. Well, actually we kind of do need it, but that's beside the point. But who uses it? Plants. Okay, so we produce things for other organisms, they produce things for us. And that's why it's extremely important to keep diversity in species within any biosphere. Extinction is caused by a bunch of different things. In that same garden scenario, why would that plant species become extinct? It uses up all the good things it needs to survive. So one of a concerted effort by a group of biologists called conservation biology is an effort to protect biodiversity on this planet. And again, biodiversity is extremely important. So, habitat loss. How are we, for example, contributing to habitat loss? Yeah, we cut down all the trees, we paved the roads, we put a bunch of houses there, and then we get mad when the big black bear wants to sit on our deck and eat from our bird feeder, right?
Or in the trash bucket.
Yeah, okay.
Leave food in your car,
Right. So we don't like that, but that was his house first. Exotic species. When we go to different areas and bring back species by mistake. For example, have you ever heard of a zebra mussel? Yeah, do you know what they do?
They were in a lake.
Yeah, and they just grow out of control because there's no natural predators for them. So they just grow out of control, and what do? Yeah, they eat up all the food, they consume all the oxygen in different bodies of water. Another example we discussed last class with milfoil. Again, it doesn't belong in our waters naturally, but when it gets there, there's really no natural predators for it. So it goes crazy, and it kills off some of the native species in those areas. So exotic species can lead to the extinction of native species in an area. Pollution. Yeah, emissions, toxins. Good old Maine and our wonderful paper mill industry. Yes. Over-exploitation. So I'm going to plant the same crop in the same field for 1 billion years, and I'm going to wear that soil down so I can't grow anything in it anymore. Or I kill all the buffalo in an area, or I kill all the turkeys in an area. That can lead to extinction as well. And then disease.
Didn't turkeys go extinct in Maine, and then they had to bring them in from somewhere else?
Correct.
And then we just got those back like 10 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, because they were protected. So, we kind of go through that phase where, we have none, then we have a little bit too many, now we're going to go back to normal. Did it fly into you? Usually that's what they do.
I was like, it ran over, and I thought
Yeah,
And I
they did.
Yeah.
They did.
I hit it and it like flew off into the bush and I could see the feathers. You know, it was flopping and then I turned around and I went back and it was gone. So it must
Yeah.
not have killed it. It ran off.
Well, hopefully, either that or somebody's going to have a good meal
Oh,
later.
no, I wasn't, it was right up the street. I turned around, right
Yeah.
in sight still of where it was.
Well, it might have hurt it enough to, it flew away then, and who knows.
Well,
But that's okay. I mean,
it's fine.
yeah, we'll pretend it's fine.
Yeah, because I didn't mean to hit it.
And then normally, typical diseases will also contribute to the extinction of a species. But look at, this is natural things. And this is what? Yeah, we kind of, yeah. Well, overexploitation can happen when a species moves in and eats all of something else too. So that can happen too. But doesn't happen as often as man-made exploitation. So, biodiversity can provide value directly to humans. Medicinal value through pharmaceuticals and natural compounds. For many years, my life before teaching at a community college was in research biology. And we used to create chemicals, chemotherapies, from sea urchins and extracts from sea urchins. Yeah, so it was a neat job. Agricultural value as a food source. So has anybody ever heard of putting blue-green algae inside their smoothie in the morning? Yeah. It's very good for you. It's very high in a lot of phytochemicals that can help you live a very healthy life. So exploring different things in nature to help with respect to nutrition. The commercial value for consumable products. Again, things we could sell. Also can provide an indirect value. And then when we look at that whole cycling of nutrients through our environment, biodiversity is extremely important to keep that at a normal rate. Disposal of wastes, decomposition. If we were to kill off a lot of the decomposers in our environment, we'd be left with a lot of what?
Trash.
A lot of trash. So it's important to have biodiversity in an ecosystem with respect to the decomposers in that ecosystem. Natural filtration and regeneration of water. So water, the water you drink, anybody have a well at home? Most of us do, right? We live in Maine. Where does that water come from?
Mountains, springs.
But water that's done what? Yeah, it's filtered through the earth. So you're drinking way down deep groundwater. So it's important, that natural filtration process is important for you to have good fresh water to drink. Reduction of erosion, regulation of climate. What's ecotourism? Well, yeah, come to see the natural stuff. We have a lot of that here in Maine, right? Because we do a pretty good job as Mainers of trying to keep our landscape fairly pristine, except for the big paper mills and stuff like that. But we're getting better, right? So these are all indirect values of keeping a diverse ecosystem. Working towards a sustainable society, provide needed resources and protects biodiversity. Have you heard of small, sustainable, local farming? We do a good job of that in Maine too, right? Is that something that we should kind of work towards as a society, rather than trying to have small pockets feed many, many people? It would help with biodiversity. It would help reduce toxins. It would help reduce wastes. It would do so much for our area to have a sustainable society, or build different pockets of sustainable farming practices within societies. So current human culture is not sustainable. More land is used for human purposes rather than left as natural ecosystems. So we rely on agriculture in big, huge areas to feed tons and tons of people, which isn't good. We already saw some of the adverse effects of big, large farming, right? The pesticide use, my brain's gone today. What else do they use in big, large farms?
What happens if there's like that, like if there's a big farm and they have that mad cow?
Right,
And then everything has to be wiped out.
exactly. Or fertilizer use. That's what my brain was trying to think of. We know that's bad for the land. Too much agriculture is devoted to livestock. It would be better if we had smaller little pockets, our local cattle farms, rather than big, huge feedlots.
Haven't we lost a lot of farming in Maine?
But I think we're starting to go back to, or at least society in general in the United States is realizing how important it is to go back to these smaller sustainable farms, because it's just not good for our land. Too much reliance on renewable or non-renewable fossil fuels and minerals. So we want to start to get away from that so we can have a sustainable society, because that's not going to last forever. So renewable energy sources would be used to provide energy. This would be in a sustainable society. Heat and waste materials would be used efficiently. Do you know there's a bunch of paper mills up north that heat the mill with sawdust from the wood that they saw? Is that a smart idea? Yeah. There would be maximal recycling of all resources. So instead of 7 garbage pails that you put out every week for the garbage guy, or you schlep to the dump, depending on what you have to do, maybe we should put 1 bag out. You know, take some of the stuff that we could compost instead of throwing it in the trash. Trying to put things in containers that we could compost rather than plastic that we will be around forever and ever and ever and ever. Styrofoam. Do we need that? No. So working towards a sustainable society is what we as human beings should do, so that we constantly have a recycling of materials throughout our system. Isn't that horrible? What is it mostly? Yeah. Yep, plastic, styrofoam. Look at all these styrofoam trays. I don't know. I should ask Jim where he got that from. Pretty gross though, huh? And that's in some waterway somewhere, collecting somewhere, probably at the end. So,
isn't there like a spot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, like all the trash, like collects such currents?
well, trash barges would dump stuff in the ocean all the time. If you were on a ship, a military ship, for example, where do you dispose of your waste? You blow it out into the ocean. Dilution is the solution. That's kind of the saying. But you keep pissing into the same bucket. Even if it's a big bucket, I know this is a disgusting analogy, but you know where I'm going with that. Yeah? So, we have to start taking care of our ecosystem. So that is ecology. And now we begin the last chapter, which we probably should have done before we did all of this, but you know, I'm working a little backwards. And we are going to do chapter 15. So what's your next exam on?
Everything.
No, it's just on the last few chapters.
So it's 13, what is it, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19. Basically those three PowerPoints. So 13, 14, well, it's just 3 chapters. That PowerPoint that was created is actually condensed material. Yeah. So it's off the PowerPoints. No panicking. So it's the PowerPoint that's up online
For ecology.
for 13, 14. Then there's one that's called ecology, and then there's this one. So it's just 3 chapters. Bulk, just like it's always been. Yes? Are we good with that? She's panicking.
So the test is next Wednesday, right?
Text is next Wednesday, yes. So basically we're going to start this. We're going to work on it some more Wednesday. Probably finish it up Monday and then have our exam on Wednesday. Okay? So you have a lot of time. I know it doesn't seem like it, but you do. You good with that? No, not really. Now, when's your lab exam? That Wednesday also? Yours is Monday. You have a Monday lab?
Most of us have the same one.
If we, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, have,
Wednesday lab. All right. So how did life first arise on Earth? We have some theories. We have some guesses. We have some hypotheses. Do we know for sure, not really. You know, did it come from somewhere else and land here? Or did it start? So, to gain insight, scientists have tried to see if they could start to produce organic molecules from inorganic substances. And they made from scratch the entire genome of a small bacteria called Mycoplasma mycotes. And they transplanted that artificial genome into the cells of a closely related species called Mycoplasma capricolum. Did it survive? Yep. It started to produce. It started to make more. So who knows? Can we create life from inorganic
It's
molecules?
kind of scary that they know how to create a genome.
No, just that genome. It's not that easy to make any genome.
Well, that's bacteria.
Correct. Which is what kind of cell? Prokaryote, very simple.
So, hypothetically saying, they could create a virus that, you know, could be used for warfare.
Maybe. Probably. Mm-hmm. Scary. Yes?
yeah.
It's messed up.
So when we look and we discuss the evolution of microbial life, that first beginning, very simple cells, we have to realize how long this process took. Billions of years. 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth was formed. Was it inhabitable at that point? No, not at all. Evolved by about 3.5 billion years ago, we see the very simple list, these very simple prokaryotic cells. How long did that take between Earth first coming and, 1.1 billion. I would like that many pennies.
Yeah.
Right? I would be very happy with that. It's when we started to see what coming on board? Yeah, so the beginnings of oxygen production about 2.7 billion years ago is when we started to see life kind of take off as we know it on this planet. So lived alone for more than a billion years and continue in great abundance today. So we're talking about long, long, long periods of time from those tiny, tiny little simple cells before we see some of the organisms that we see today. So the best, and I can't fit it all on one slide, so you can get a nice representation when you look at page 294 and 295 in your textbook, because you see the origin of the Earth and then nothing. And then once the Earth becomes cool enough, starts to solidify, we start to see land masses. We start about 3,500 million years ago, which is 3.5 what? Billion years ago. We start to see the oldest fossils of what? Yeah, prokaryotic cells. So it's very simple cells.
How can you get fossil cells?
Yeah, that's a tough one too. Good question. You can, but it's very difficult to see. Because remember, what's a fossil? Yeah, well, it's something that's come on top of material that has died and under high pressure created a mold of it. Now remember, we're talking about something that we have to get out a very high-powered microscope just to see. So it's very difficult. Single-celled eukaryotic, and what's the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic?
One has nucleus and the other doesn't.
Yeah, so we start to see a more complex cell. We start to see an organized nucleus. We start to see those membrane-bound organelles. That first evolved about 2.1 billion years ago, at least as far as we know it. Multicellular, more than one cell, first evolved at least 1.2 billion. So how long did it take to go from a single cell to more than one cell? Yeah, point what? 0.9 billion years. That's a long time, yes? So it didn't happen it didn't like, poof, magic, here you are, humans. That didn't happen. It took billions and billions and billions of years for these changes to be seen. So again, that I put it on a few slides. It doesn't have a good effect. But we start to see more diverse life coming when we start to see the production of what in our atmosphere?
Oxygen.
Yeah, oxygen. Why?
Because that's what we need to get our energy up and going.
That's exactly what it's looking for. Remember when we talked about photosynthesis and we talked about cellular respiration? We made a lot more energy when what was around? Because they produced what for us? Oxygen. So it's very hard to make a complex organism or a complex cell, or better yet, a complex multicellular organism, if I don't have enough energy to do that. So once I started to see more oxygen in the atmosphere, I started to see more and more of these little branches occurring. That's because I had the ability to make a lot more energy. So when we look at the end of the branch versus the beginning of the branch, we see many, many different types of cells, and then separated by whether they are simple or complex, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So 500 million years ago, 500 million years ago, we started to see plants colonize the land. The oldest fossils we see probably what, 600 million years ago? So we're like a little dot, yeah? We haven't been around very long. Yeah, we're a speck on that timeline. All the major phyla of animals evolved by the end of the Cambrian explosion. And that was how many millions of years ago? 540 million years ago. And lasted about 10 million years. So we saw a big explosion of all these different animals evolving during this period. Yeah, or animals as we know it. So when we look at taxonomy, we start to see animal coming on board rather than just what? Who was before?
Bacteria.
Yeah, the bacteria, the small single-celled organisms. Plants and fungi started to colonize the land, so they were more and more of them on land rather than in what? In water. So the theory is that we started in a water environment and moved from that water to the land. So plants and fungi started to colonize about 500 million years ago and were followed by creatures that were normally in the water that could actually now utilize that land environment. So followed by amphibians that evolved from certain fish. Do you ever see a lungfish? They're so cool. Yeah, they have little tiny appendages, yeah?
There's another, they're mud puppies.
Yeah.
Mud skippers or mud puppies.
Little
Yeah, they're kind of like salamander-ish. So they can start walking out onto the land and utilizing those resources. Lungfish. Yeah, Google that. They're so cool. So if you use a clock analogy to take down all of the major events in history of life on Earth, we see a whole bunch of empty time from noon to about what? Yeah, I hate that clock. Yeah, 4:30. Yeah, 4:30. Yeah, it's a bad clock. It's a bad analogy. But anyway, you see a big period of time where there's nothing on there, life as we know it. Then we start with the prokaryotic cells, those very simple cells. We start to see oxygen come on board. And once we see oxygen come into the atmosphere, we start to see more complex cells because they can now do what? Make enough energy to become more complex. So we start to see single-celled eukaryotes. Then we start to see some multicellular eukaryotic organisms. And again, all of these still exist on the planet today. And then we start to see the complex stuff. Animals coming on board. Yeah, little teeny wedge humans. So that, again, that's something that's hard for us to wrap our heads around, how short a time we've been here, because we think we're kind of the end-all and be-all, but we really aren't. So we've only been here for a very, very short period of time with respect to life on this planet. We may never know for sure how life began on this planet. I mean, did the first cell come from some meteorite from a planet that just blew up and landed here? And then, okay, some of those cells survived, and then they started reproducing themselves, and that's how we got life. We don't know. We don't know. So all life today arises by the reproduction of pre-existing cells. Living comes from living, as far as we know today. And that's called biogenesis. So when we talk about living organisms, they had to come from some other living organism.
Where did that pre-existing life come from?
Exactly.
What is biogenesis?
So living comes from living. So cells make more cells. Organisms make more organisms.
That's a terrible theory. It's a terrible theory.
Well, again, if we look at some of the scientific theories about that first cell's production, it took so long to happen, and the conditions were so extreme that, again, that first cell may have then become more cells. So who knows? So if this is true, how did the first organism arise? From the time of the Greeks, ancient Greeks, until well into the 1800s, it was commonly believed that life regularly arises from non-living matter. And this is what spontaneous generation. Were they right? Were they right, though? No, not really. They did a whole bunch of experiments with things like maggots and stuff like that. And realized that, oh no, those things don't just spontaneously happen, that they come from other living organisms. So today, resolving the biogenesis paradox, most biologists think it's possible that life on Earth evolved from very simple cells. And those very simple cells were produced by a combination of chemicals and extreme physical processes. Can we create these things in the lab? Yeah. According to one hypothesis, first organisms were produced of a chemical evolution in 4 stages. And we're looking at an experiment called Can Biological Monomers Form Spontaneously? And we see this on page 297 in your textbook. So the first stage in the origin of life, and again, this is a what?
Hypothesis.
Yeah, it's a hypothesis. It's a speculation. First stage in the origin of life was the first to be extensively studied in the laboratory. So this experiment was based on that first stage. We took a whole bunch of macromolecules and created them in a closed system, just like your ecosystem is a closed system. So modern biological molecules, macromolecules, big molecules, are all composed of what? Little parts. Like when we talk about an organic molecule, it's got some carbon in it and it's got some hydrogen in it, right? And they come together to make a big molecule. So all those big molecules are composed of elements. And these elements were present in abundance on early Earth. So the question is, could those biological molecules, big ones, arise spontaneously under conditions like those on early Earth? So what was early Earth like? Yeah, there was some of these elements there, a lot of heat, right? Heating and cooling, explosions, gases. So, thinking of us as a closed system, this ecosystem, we are sort of encased by our environment. We're giving off all kinds of things that are being stuck in this beaker we call our ecosystem. A closed system designed to simulate Earth conditions could produce biological important organic molecules from inorganic ingredients. So the prediction is organic molecules would form and accumulate in this closed system. Did they? Yeah. So they created this apparatus that was built to mimic the early Earth's atmosphere, applied a lot of heat to it, closed it all up so that all the things would build up and condense down. Hydrogen gas, and that's what we believe was on early Earth. Methane, ammonia, and water vapor. Because that's another thing we had on this planet to help with living, right? Is there any living organism you can think of on this planet that doesn't need water to survive in some way, shape, or form? Then we had sparks that were discharged into a chamber to mimic all of the lightning storms that we hypothesized happened on the planet, early Earth. And then things were cooled and condensed and dropped down into that pool. Condensed and cooled the atmosphere, causing water and dissolved compounds that came together like rain in our atmosphere into the little sea created in this experiment. So it's on a much smaller basis than the planet is. And Miller and Urey were the experimenters that created this experiment. And what was the outcome? It ran for a week. An abundance of organic molecules essential for life had collected in the sea. So there were chemical reactions that went on between all of those inorganic things. Well, we had some organic stuff because we had some carbon there. And we made molecules like amino acids. Amino acids are monomers of what? Proteins. So, these experiments have been repeated and extended by other scientists, and they all get the same results. So it kind of supports the idea that organic molecules could have arisen from these substances that were on this planet. Again, what we have to wrap our head around is billions of years. So we didn't make proteins in a day, we made them in billions of years. So, abiotic synthesis of polymers. Again, non-living things. Researchers have brought about the polymerization of monomers to form polymers. What the heck does that mean? What's a monomer? Exactly. And bringing together polymerization, making one single unit a more than one, poly is what that term means. So proteins, nucleic acids, by dripping solutions of organic monomers into things like hot sand, clay, rock. Were those on this planet in early Earth? That's pretty much all it was. So a key to forming life was the isolation of a collection of these abiotically created molecules that had to be enclosed in some sort of membrane. So we have to somehow organize these molecules to create a cell. So different laboratory experiments were done to demonstrate that these pre-cells could have formed spontaneously from those non-living, abiotically produced organic compounds. So, such pre-cells produced in laboratory display some lifelike properties. They can form some sort of membrane that surrounds a group of molecules. Those membranes are selectively permeable, just like our membranes of our cells, which means what? Correct. They can grow by absorbing molecules from their surroundings. So things that they're floating around in can pass into them. And then they can utilize those things to make energy and to grow. They can swell or shrink when placed in solutions of different salt concentrations. So again, these are very rudimentary pre-cells. Definitely prokaryotic, but reacting to their environment. So when we talked about cells and how they function, when we talked about tonicity, isotonic, hypertonic, hypotonic, that's what they're talking about here. So water was extremely important for those first pre-cells. So, stage 4, origin of self-replicating molecules. So we somehow have to make more in order to create multicellular or to carry on a species of a single cellular organism. So life is defined partially by the process of inheritance. And that's based on self-replicating molecules. So again, when we talk about these very beginning cells, one hypothesis is that the first genes were short little strands of RNA. Not even DNA yet, because DNA was kind of complex. DNA is a what? Yeah, double-stranded. RNA single-stranded, a little bit easier to make. What are the monomers of RNA? The single building blocks. Phosphate, sugar, and what's the third?
Nitrogen bases.
Correct.
Nitrogenous bases.
Those are the monomers. She needs to take a break now. After all.
Couldn't get it to come out.
Those are called, what are those three little things together called? Nucleotides. So the combination of those guys to form nucleotides. So the first genes were short strands of little nucleotides, RNA, that were able to make more RNA when other nucleotides were in the area. Without the assistance of proteins, they could form copies of themselves. Maybe RNAs can act as enzymes. And those first enzymes, RNA, making more RNA, they're called ribozymes. Again, this is all theory, but we had little RNA monomers floating around. Those were the beginnings. And then somehow they formed strands, like messenger RNA, for example. And then they might have folded in on each other and created another copy. And then replicate that material to other organisms. So how long did this take? Millions, over millions of years. Natural selection favored the most effective pre-cells. Again, it's ones that could utilize what was in the environment to make more. And then according to what Darwin thought, we saw the first prokaryotic cell evolve. But again, it took a long time. And prokaryotic cells were the beginning, that simple cell. Prokaryotic cells lived and evolved all alone on the earth for how long? 2 billion years. Billion! That's a long time. None of us could ever wait that long. We're way too impatient. So we look at the planet today and we see that prokaryotic cells are pretty much everywhere. Everywhere. Because probably, why are they everywhere? Why do you think they might be everywhere?
Because they have 2 billion years.
Yeah, they've been here a long time. That's right. So they're found wherever there is life. We see prokaryotic cells. Have a collective biomass that is at least 10 times that of all eukaryotic cells. So if I counted the number of prokaryotic cells versus the number of eukaryotic cells, and we're talking about you in multicellular organisms, the prokaryotes would way outnumber you. They thrive in all kinds of habitats. And again, that's because they could only survive if they could utilize different things in those areas. So as they evolved and different mutations occurred, they were able to utilize their environment, and the ones that could utilize their environment were the ones that did what? Those are the ones that survived to make more. So we see them in all kinds of habitats. Again, we're learning very recently, as a matter of fact, that certain habitats that we thought for many years could not support life actually does. So way too hot, way too cold, way too salty, way too acidic, way too alkaline. We see that there's different prokaryotic organisms there. And eukaryotes don't do so well in these extremes. So they cause about half of all human diseases and are commonly benign or beneficial. So as we sit here today, there's tons of prokaryotic organisms. I know it sounds terrible and it's probably going to make you itchy, but they're crawling all over you. Yeah. Yeah. The skin, all over your skin, in your hair, in your eyelashes, you name it, they're there. I know, gives you the jiggies. Yeah, and they're beneficial. How about in your does anybody know you have very beneficial bacteria that lives in your digestive system? And now we're starting to hear that more. I think many of you have heard the term probiotics. That we realize how important these organisms are. If we clear them out, are we going to feel good? No. And a lot of what we're doing with our food sources are getting rid of our normal bacteria and making us feel horrible. Going back to natural foods, whole foods that contain some of these guys are important to make us feel better.
There's a elimination diet for folks with fibromyalgia.
Mm-hmm.
That I have to start after the holidays.
Oh, bless you. Sorry.
That means I get to eat nothing.
There you go. Yep. And then slowly what you'll do is add things back into. Because we've created, what are we creating? A society of people who are what? Well, that too, but you said it, I didn't.
Overweight.
Well, no, that are allergic to everything in their society. All of these allergies to things, you know. We didn't have all these allergies when we were younger.
My niece has celiac disease, so she can't eat.
Yeah, that's becoming more and more prevalent now. There's a whole it's a intolerance to wheat and rye and barley, and we're seeing more and more of us in our society developing these intolerances. Could it be because we're altering that natural form that our bodies aren't used to seeing? Or could it be because of all the toxins we're putting into our environment? Toxins on our, pesticides on our foods. Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a combination of what we're doing in our society to our food sources. Too much processing of food. It's so much better when your body has to process a whole food. When you start taking away that process, we no longer are used to doing that. Correct. So if you haven't had vegetables in a while, anybody in the room fall into that category? You hate vegetables. You hate vegetables too? Good. No, but the vegetable haters, or the ones that kind of have too busy a life to remember that green things are important to eat. And you add them, yeah, me too. But you decide that it's time to eat more vegetables. What usually happens? Yes? Yeah, it does, because it's not used to what? Processing all of that. Once it gets back into the swing of processing what you put in it. Yeah, because you typically, yeah. So it's what your body's used to processing. Vegetables are extremely important, not only for the nutrients they provide for you, but for the fiber they provide for you. So when you take my nutrition class, we'll talk about fiber and bulk and how that's extremely important. Even though you can't digest that fiber, what's it help do? Yeah, it pushes things through your digestive system, waste products that would normally just sit there and kind of build up and fester. Yeah. Imagine if you could never put the trash out. Yes? Well, that's what you do when you don't eat enough vegetables and you don't pass your waste products on a regular basis. Anybody ever been in that situation where they haven't passed their waste products for a few days? You don't feel so good, do you? So, these little prokaryotic lovelies are everywhere. Compared to eukaryotes, prokaryotes are the most abundant and typically much smaller cellularly than eukaryotic cells. So what is this? Does anybody know what this is?
Isn't that like a vent?
Yeah. What's coming out? What's coming out of that? Heat and
Sulfuric acid.
sulfuric acid. And you know what else is in there?
There are crabs and there are shrimps and there are living organisms that the worms, those
Yeah.
tubal worms that need that
Yep.
to survive, because if they didn't have that, they wouldn't be living.
Correct. And a lot of what? Eukaryotic organisms. So, prokaryotes living in soil, extremely important. We find them at the bottom of lakes and rivers and oceans. They're important for decomposing dead organic material. We had this discussion before. Where were you meant to go after you die? Back into the ground, because it took you a lot of years to produce all of these complex molecules that make you who you are.
And then when they get put back into the earth is replenished.
Exactly.
The stuff that
You pulled out of it to make you. So dead organisms, other organic waste materials return vital chemicals that were pulled out of the ecosystem to make them back into the environment. So what is this supposed to represent? Do you know? Yeah, the head of a pin. There's all kinds of nasties on there, right? So when I get a pinprick, what do? If I'm sewing some clothes and you suck on it, put it in your mouth. But, yeah. But what does that do you know? You do that naturally. You do it automatically. It's kind of instinct. But when you spit all over it, what do you think it does? Well, it provides enzymes that are going to kill some of these nasty little critters. Because if you look at your saliva and your makeup of your saliva, it's a whole bunch of water and ions and then antibacterial-like substances along with enzymes that start to break big molecules into small molecules. Yep. What do animals, exactly, what do animals do? Yep. So they get rid of, they help to sterilize, they clean, they do something called debride when they clean. Yep. Yep. Unfortunately, sometimes there's some nasties in the mouth of certain animals that might then get transferred into your wound. But yeah.
My niece did a science project in California, her science fair project for 6th grade, and she did a her mouth and dog's mouth, and her mouth was cleaner than dog's mouth.
Her mouth was cleaner?
And she proved that it was met.
Cleaner with respect to what?
I don't know. I went
And how did she, yeah, see, there might have been a lot of variables that she didn't account for in her experiment. One of the things we're going to see in an animal's mouth is a lot of very caustic enzymes. The reason, my dog eats her own poop, okay?
My mother's dog.
Bless her heart. God love her. The reason she does that is why?
she's a dog.
She's a dog, and what does she have that we don't have?
the enzymes to
Well, and she's got an amazing sense of smell. So she might have had a lovely meal the day before that she still can pick up in. Yeah, nasty.
I mean, not like that, but
My dogs lick pee. Why do they do that? It's like I always pull them, I'm like, knock it off. You
Yeah.
guys are so, they'll, like, one will pee and the other will lick their pee. And it's like, you guys are
They're marking their territory. That's a dog way of communicating. We think it's crazy because humans don't like to do things like that. But yeah, no. But they also are eating a lot of, in nature, what would a dog normally eat?
raw would either be caged
Or raw food. and they'd need a lot of strong enzymes to break those down. So you can see a lot of that in their mouth. With respect to the chemicals that can destroy microbes, yes. So, all right, so we're going to pick up with the structure and function of prokaryotic cells on Wednesday. I know, we didn't do too much because of the little thingy, but